Hi everyone. I was asked to do a video for parents with children with disabilities who become adults who are seeking information about what do they do, how do they plan for children who grow into adults and live with them and eventually need to go live in a different setting. Because many of these parents in their 50s and 60s are beginning to have their own healthcare needs, and they know that they will not be able to care for these children for the rest of their lives. So stay with me while I talk about the importance of supporting independence and how to take steps to move forward whether you are a parent with a disabled child. Whether you're in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 60s, 70s, or 80s. I'll share some disability resources for some of you who may not know what exists, and for some of you who may not even have applied for benefits. Then I'm going to talk about the emotional aspects of being a family caregiver for a child with disabilities or an adult child with disabilities, and also persons with cognitive impairments that can eventually result from some of these developmental disabilities and advance to dementia in later years. I'm Pamela D Wilson. I'm a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker who has been where you might find yourself today in your care or self-care journey. Please click below to like this video, follow my channel, and comment, even if it's only to say thanks for the video. Your participation helps others find this channel and these videos. You can also check out my website, PamelaDWilson.com, where there's plenty of other tips, supports, online courses, my book, my podcast, a lot of helpful information for caregivers. So I want to begin with some definitions specifically to encourage you, if you have not, to know that you can apply for benefits with children with disabilities. The term disability can be very, very broad, from an intellectual or developmental disability that occurs immediately at birth, or for someone as a child or even a very young adult up to age 22. Now, sometimes you're going to hear an abbreviation called IDD. As you know, there's a lot of acronyms that are used in the disability world. And so how do you know if somebody has a disability? Well, usually it's through a diagnosis, right? A diagnosis like autism spectrum disorders, being deaf or blind, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, ADHD, a lot of others. And so how do these show up? Well, they're characterized by difficulties with language, with speech, cognitive processing, mobility, sometimes learning difficulties. People have trouble doing self-care, or they really can't live independently. So in order to receive benefits from the state that you live in, you must have a formal diagnosis and to understand what that qualification process is like. Now, I know many of you watching have already done this, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention this for people who have not. State services through Medicaid or other programs have a lot of different names, which is why it's important to contact the Department of Human Services in the state where you live and the Department of Disability Services. They could be called consumer directive services. Sometimes it's called person-centered planning. Support services. There's caregiver respite programs. There are wonderful day programs. Supported employment, supportive living, intermediate care facilities, state-supported living centers, and small group homes. So there's a lot of support out there. The challenge is it takes time and effort to investigate it. So as I mentioned, how do you find these? Google the name of your state and add the words family support services, disability services, developmental disability services, community center boards, search for state disability programs, and so on. Disability care or caring for a disabled child who grows to be a disabled adult is a specialty area, similar to dementia and Alzheimer's care. Because persons with both of these diagnoses can have a lot of other chronic diseases and health issues going on and needs. Children that I have been involved with who had disabilities, many of them had eating disorders or sometimes personality disorders. On the other end of the scale, people with dementia who are older can hallucinate. So there's a lot of things that you as a caregiver, you as a married couple, spouse, sister, brother, many things that you experience, right? So some differences. Disabled children who grow up to be adults have this lifetime ahead of them, while in most situations, by the time that a disabled person has dementia, or any person has dementia, most of their life has passed and they're moving toward the end of life. So you're working and caring for people at both ends of the spectrum, right? Another difference is that a person who is not disabled but has Alzheimer's or dementia has had a whole life unaffected by disabilities until their diagnosis shows up and it's life affecting. So on the other hand, children with disabilities rely on their parents for everything. Parents have to expose them to a variety of life situations like going to school, having a job, making friends, acquiring social skills, and so on. So there's a lot of work and time and effort that goes into this type of caregiving. Now, caregivers, regardless of where you are, young child, middle-aged disabled child, older disabled child with dementia, right? There's a lot of worries that happen, whether you are a parent, who's caregiver, spouse, adult children. But the idea all the way along that I support is to support independence versus dependence. And a lot of this really comes from the way that you look at disabilities or health problems or how you think you should act in a certain situation. There are stories of children with disabilities, people with life-threatening illnesses who have done amazing things. I have known people with severe disabilities participating in the Paralympics and becoming leaders in the disabled community with the skills that they had. So for all of us, when we think of our lives, whether we're disabled or not, there's kind of like this thing called a ceiling and a floor. So the ceiling of a disabled child's experience is closely related to the ceiling of their caregiver's abilities. So as we advance through life, we have many opportunities to learn and have new experiences and to meet people. And that raises our level of knowledge and experience and the way that we look at things and the way that we think of things. So I think of things today very differently than I did 20 years ago or 30 years ago because my experiences have broadened my perspective. They broaden the way that I think about things. And let me kind of just share a story so that you know that I've experienced a lot of what you've experienced. So years ago, I was a care manager and a guardian, and I was legally responsible for adults with disabilities. I managed their health care, where they lived, their money, everything. And as you know, it's not easy. And similar to dementia, there's no cure for this. This type of caregiving is really, it's for life. And navigating these systems, learning how to navigate these systems can be very, very complicated, but there's a lot of help and support. So let's talk about some of the emotional aspects that we as caregivers get into. So there's a natural tendency when you're a parent to have your children live with you, right? The ones who are not disabled grow up, move out of the house at, 18, 20, 21, 30, 40. But many parents of disabled children have these children live with them indefinitely because there's no rush to move them out, and sometimes there are concerns about their ability to live more independently in the community. So living with you seems manageable. It seems easy. It seems like the right thing to do. A lot of disabled children do have needs so that they can't live independently. And so this is kind of like the logical reason that parents just go on with this and many times don't think about, oh my gosh, I'm 70. My child is 50. What if something happens to me? What am I going to do? In all caregiving roles, caregivers can be overprotective, especially caregivers of persons with disabilities. Now, what being overprotective does is it can result in children and adults that you care for becoming more dependent on you. So, as you might know, the more that you help someone in any area of their life, sometimes the less capable they are of seeing themselves being able to accomplish anything. They need you to give them confidence. They need you to give them direction. So being overprotective, in a sense, places a ceiling on an individual's abilities where they can't get above that unless some outside skills and knowledge and experiences come in to change that. So opportunity, self-esteem, confidence, independence, those are things that we want to foster in other people. So when you compare disabled children to non-disabled children, children who are not disabled go to school and have a lifetime of experiences. Again, children with disability depend on their parents to give them those things. So let's just go through some situations. A parent may think that homeschooling a child with disability is like the best thing to do because you're afraid to place them in school with, honestly, children who may not be nice to them, and they may experience some bumps in the road. And so while homeschooling may seem like a really good idea, your child misses the opportunity to interact with other children and learn from mistakes like we all do. They miss out on socialization. They miss out on the ability to learn from teachers who may have more skills in education than you do as a parent. Everybody, people with disabilities or not, deserve respect and what I call the dignity of risk, which means the opportunity to go out there and fall flat on our faces and do things that we learn from. Because those things, those mistakes or gaps or whatever you want to call them, help us become more resilient, and they help us to learn how to navigate through failures and to manage our emotions. So being overprotective in any situation in life can restrict somebody's dignity and their independence and their right to learn. So as a parent or a caregiver of a disabled child, it's easy just to kind of go on with the status quo, right? Because it's easy. It's more difficult to make a decision to act, to do something different, to put a child in school, to help them get a job, to move out of the home into another setting with other disabled people where they can flourish and learn and grow and have wonderful, amazing experiences. I think that we can all agree that our exposure to other people, making friends, working, socializing, it can bring a lot of blessings and very interesting experiences into our life. And we don't want to take that opportunity away from other people. So we can also relate this to caregivers of persons with dementia because many, again, disabled children can have dementia when they're older. So you've got something else even more to think about. So many people with dementia live with their families as long as practically possible. But again, that goes back to living with only one person. And that caregiver can be very stressed and burned out and exhausted and short-tempered. And I'm not saying this to talk bad about caregivers. It just happens because you're exposed to day in, day out stress and unexpected situations, and it's always more and it's more and it's more, and you're expected to give more and more and more. But when you think about it, is living with a caregiver who is exhausted and stressed and exhibiting all of these emotions, is that really good for the care receiver? Might a person who is disabled or have dementia be more active and physically or mentally stimulated, going to a day program with other people like them, or living in a community with other people like them? It can be an individual choice. It can be a very hard choice. So let me give an example of what can happen if you don't make these decisions early, if you have a disabled child, or if you are caring for a person with dementia. Again, if you delay making these decisions, things can happen, right? So I was a professional guardian, many of you know. I became the guardian for a woman in her 50s who all of her life lived in her parents' home in their basement. Now, her parents died within a couple of months of each other, suddenly and unexpectedly. This woman could not cook, she didn't know how to clean house, and generally she did not shower, wash her hair, or bathe for months at a time. Now, when she was younger, she actually went to high school and she graduated, but she ended up back in her parents' home. She had no friends, but because her parents were highly educated, she had some reasonable social skills, but she was afraid of everything. So my staff and I had to work with her on a lot of basic skills that initially, honestly, were hygiene. She had to be able to have a clean appearance. It was a struggle to get her to shower and bathe and wash her hair and change her clothes. The next thing we worked on was going out of the house safely. And how do you take public transportation? How do you ride a bus to get from A to B? She had absolutely no money management skills. Her nutrition was horrible. She mostly ate junk food, Twinkies, ding-dongs, pizza, fried food. She had no regular medical or dental care, so her teeth were in very bad condition, especially because no one taught her to brush her teeth a couple times a day. It took us years to help this woman gain skills and the self-esteem to care enough about herself to take care of herself. But she was a success story. Took a lot of work. We moved her out of her parents' home into a group home where honestly, she struggled at first, which could be expected, right? If you lived in your parents' basement for 50 years, had no friends, had no living skills, it's going to be hard to leave that situation and go into a totally different situation. She struggled at first, but she did amazingly well over time. So, what is your situation with the care of your disabled child? Have you done so much for them that the idea of moving them out of the house into another situation scares you to death? It probably should, because it's going to be a scary situation regardless, right? You're going to have a lot of doubts, you're going to have a lot of guilt, you're going to have feelings. So when we look back at my client, her parents honestly did the best they could with the circumstances that they had. When they began to experience health issues, their ability to help their daughter or to do things was just too much for them, and they probably just gave up. So while their daughter had a place to live and she was safe, no outside life from her parents, limited experiences, no friends, no socialization, no activities, no daily living skills. And so how good is this for a person who's 50 years old, who's now having to learn things that most of us learn in our younger years, in our teens, in our 20s? It's a lot of work to come from that far behind. So while your family situation may not be this extreme, right? If you died tomorrow, could your child live in a more independent situation? What would that transition be like for them? If you're caring for a disabled child with dementia, can they live independently? If not, and the time is coming when you know you're not going to be able to care for them, it is time to make a plan and to make the effort to help the person you care for become more independent and need you less. Now, more challenges, right? Children with disabilities can have mental health problems that carry into adulthood. And so you've got to kind of look at health and mental health and financial plans and daily living plans and all of this. But before you even get to that, you've got to come to terms with adapting, you adapting to a different situation. Your adult children or young children adapting to a different situation. So you've got to transform your thinking into this, why do I have to do this now? Right? Why didn't I do it years ago? It would have been much easier then, but now I have to do it. It's time. It's upon me. I feel burdened. It's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be hard. So So it's the why now of moving a child with disabilities or moving a child with disabilities and dementia out of the home into a different living situation. You might feel like you're abandoning them, you might feel guilty, but it's possible to get through this and see the light on the other side and feel good about what you did. Honestly, sometimes as a parent or a caregiver, there are years of wear and tear. If you have a disabled child and they have been living with you for 50 years, that's 50 years of wear and tear. On the other hand, if you've been a caregiver for a person even with dementia who doesn't have disabilities, same thing. 10, 15, 20, 25 years, it's a long time. All of this physical, emotional task work, it takes a toll on you physically and mentally and emotionally. And it can be a very difficult realization to accept that you can't do it anymore. But there is going to be a point where there are things we all can't do anymore. Okay? So the option is to find support long before you get to this point or that point of physical and emotional burnout or feeling like you can't do it anymore. Planning ahead is always the best because it allows you to have a little bit more time to make things happen and to learn things. So join a support group or see a counselor if you need emotional support. Hire a care manager to help you navigate through these changes. Care managers exist in the disability world, right? The sooner that you move forward to investigate these options, the more that you can involve your child in making plans if they can understand. Because there's a point where you're going to have to be honest with your loved ones, again, if they can comprehend and understand what's going on, about how you getting older and your health problems and the opportunities for them to live a more engaged and fulfilled life are the goal. Okay? Now, if your loved one can't mentally understand, you have to do this transition and make it happen yourself. You just got to make that plan. So, how do you plan for all this? Again, if you get involved with the disability aging community, they have supports. But on my website, there's a program called Caring for Aging Parents. It applies to anybody of all ages, and it's free. And while it does more focus on aging, the resources I gave you at the beginning of this video for disability apply. You're looking for disability resources, and eventually you may be looking for aging resources, especially if you are a parent in your 70s, 80s, or 90s, and your child is 20 years younger than you are. They are aging. And so regardless of all of this, you also may need to make legal appointments, medical appointments for your disabled child, because one day you may not be around to make decisions for them. So if somebody in the family can serve as a power of attorney or a guardian, have these discussions now. Make the appointments now so that you don't have to do this in the event of a health emergency for you or some crisis shows up and you're trying to rush and do all these things, right? The time for caregivers is to make a plan today, not only for the person that you care for, but for you. I thank you for being here. I thank you for all of the people who watch my YouTube channel who make suggestions for these videos. I enjoy doing them for you. Again, please click below, follow, and like this video so that other people looking for help can find hope, help, and support. I'm Pamela D Wilson. I am a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker. You can go over to my website, PamelaDWilson.com, and find lots of more help, support, videos, podcasts, my book, articles, information there. I'll see you all again soon in another video.